The Interfaith Amigos were brought together by the tragedies of 9/11. They had no plans. They simply came together to support one another through those difficult times.
And a culture where that was unusual. And I remember
that says that there is chronic anger, fear, helplessness, hopelessness. It's not that the eyes become blind.
Understand how that feels, and to, with my colleagues, work toward better understanding.
Listen, respect, connect.
and it was a problem because how do you divide 5 into 3? And it was fortunate that in our 3rd book we found the 6th. So everything's in order once again. The first stage, a lot of people think the first stage of an interfaith dialogue consists of coming together and talking about the similarities in our traditions, or sometimes even coming together and talking about the differences. But what we found in group after group after group across the country is that the most significant way to begin a dialogue that can really deepen effectively and operate collaboratively is to begin by creating contexts in which we meet each other as human beings. Create contexts in which we can share our stories with each other, where we don't begin by pretending to be experts in our tradition or in no tradition, but we share the important issues in our lives and we listen to each other. We believe that the first stage of that deepening kind of interfaith dialogue is to get to know each other. And we believe the second stage is then to consider what we think of as the core teaching. And that core teaching might be the core teaching of our tradition, or it might be the core teaching and the core value of our lives. When we're making decisions, critical decisions about what we're going to do in our lives, what path we're going to choose, what's the beacon we look toward? How do we evaluate? What's the most important guideline that each and every one of us consults when we're making those difficult decisions? And share those with each other, whether it's a core teaching of our tradition or whether it's a core teaching and value that emerges from our experience of our lives.
The third stage, and by the way, we didn't set out to say what are the stages of interfaith dialogue. These are things that evolved as we were getting to know each other actually and meeting weekly. The third stage is an invitation, we feel, in the context of that second stage, to look at the verses and practices in our own tradition and ask ourselves which ones are consistent with that core teaching and which are inconsistent. And obviously, we feel there are some of each. And that's something that requires critical thinking and the kind of responsible citizenship as people of faith that takes us deeper into critical thinking and a deeper place of confidence about our own spiritual lives. So that was the third stage, and that used to be my only one because there were only 5. But now I have another one, which is once you get through those 3, it's possible because of the trust that starts to be developed in stage 1, because of the experience, the common experience of trying to identify that spiritual, that core teaching, and then the practice I just mentioned, to get into those difficult places, to talk and have a conversation about the difficult problems, such as, in our case, the Middle East, Israel and Palestine. You just can't start talking about that unless you've been through the other things. And I'm not saying that suddenly everybody will agree on everything. That's not the issue. The issue is respecting the ability and the, of the other person's opinion and listening carefully, really listening carefully, and then responding thoughtfully. You can do that, we feel, if you've been through those first three.
And the fifth stage, obviously after we have gone through those other four, when there is some trust, a bonding, a realization comes from within that really all of these religions are a gift from divinity. They're all paths to a shared universal. I'm a Muslim. I'm rooted in Islam. But I know from my own experience, from my own being, that when I'm open to the beauty and wisdom of other traditions, this not only makes me a better Muslim, but also a more developed, a more complete human being. Which is why we all say interfaith is not about conversion. Interfaith is about completion, becoming a more complete, developed human being. The sixth stage is, doesn't matter what your religion, whether you have a faith or not, the critical need for practices to become more complete as a developed human being. Let me just give you some examples. Not long ago, I was in a panel on racism, and there was this African-American professor who said, here's a statistic. Every 28 hours, an African-American is being killed by state-sponsored violence. I said, that's not the real problem. The real problem is that the African-American, which is a symbol for marginalized people, he or she is being murdered 1 billion times a day by all those negative, poisonous, prejudicial, biased thoughts we have of the other. They're lazy people, they're violent, they're drain on the economy. How do you overcome that? Of course, legislation will help. But the real work, he says, is overcoming our personal biases and prejudices. This needs spiritual practice. One last example, really the most urgent, most critical problem we have is environmental degradation. Our planet being in peril. I love the insight by the scientist, Dr. Gus Speth. He was advisor to the White House during Jimmy Carter's time. He said, I always thought the biggest environmental problems were loss of biodiversity, climate change, ecosystem collapse. And he said, I knew that with 30 years of good science, we could overcome these problems. He said, now I've realized after 30 years that the biggest environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And this scientists cannot solve. This requires practices to become a person of higher consciousness.
But here's the key. And that's the willingness to become vulnerable enough to name the places in your own tradition where we've gone astray, where we've drifted from our core teachings.
And we believe that in each of our traditions, we go astray when we support exclusivity. We go astray when we support violence, often violence in the name of that exclusivity. We believe that we go astray when we support the inequality of men and women. We believe that we go astray when we support homophobia. We believe that we go astray when we support in one way or another the deep inequalities in our population. We believe that we go astray when we support social injustice and racism. And we believe that we go astray when we support the degradation of our planet. Amigos would have a theme song. The theme song has Arabic, Hebrew, and English. The Arabic
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, boundlessly compassionate, infinitely merciful. La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God, meaning it's all one.
And the Hebrew is Adonai Hu Ha-Elohim Hu. The absolute transcendent one awakens within each one of us as our God. That is the one. And English?
The English is, it's all one, and I am as I am, which means it's all one, and I am as I am.
You laugh, it took him several years to get that.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. La ilaha illallahu. La ilaha illallahu. Adonai hu ha-Elohim hu. Adonai hu ha-Elohim hu. It's all one and I am as I am. It's all one and I am as I am.
Thank you.